Ash choked the valley like a second sky had fallen. The air reeked of ozone and blood-soaked metal, whispering of wars long extinguished, but never truly ended. Craters still steamed from orbital strikes, and jagged silhouettes of broken fortresses twisted skyward like the skeletons of dead titans. Darius Cole moved through the wreckage with the steadiness of ritual rifle lowered, but always ready, senses stretched thin across a land that no longer obeyed maps or orders. His armor bore the grime of weeks without reprieve. Dust clung to every seam and old wounds throbbed beneath the composite plates. The battlefield didn't speak, but it watched. He was searching for the remains of a downed reconnaissance drone. That was the mission. Locate the data core extract and report back to forward command. The war officially was over. Yet the ground whispered a different truth. Peace was a line drawn in ink, but this place bled in colors only the dead understood. Movement snagged the edge of his vision, not sudden, not hostile, but wrong. An unnatural rhythm amidst chaos. Twisted black monoliths rose from the ground in this quadrant. Vorthari architecture grown more than built, shaped by genetic resonance and semi-sentient alloys. Most were fractured. One still pulsed faintly, a heartbeat of fading light. Inside, through a fissured membrane of translucent bioglass, Darius saw her. Suspended in midair by tendrils of living cable, the figure hung limp yet defiant. Emerald skin gleamed dully beneath grime and dried blood muscles tense in defiance even in unconsciousness. Silver hair drifted around her like threads of mercury suspended in anti-grav stillness. Faint pulses of electricity crawled across the restraint's neural suppression vines grown to subdue, not kill. She had been important once, but whoever left her here had stripped her of name, title, and dignity. She wasn't dead, not yet. Caution warred with instinct. Logic said leave her. Every protocol demanded a call to command a quarantine perimeter, a bio-threat scan. But his boots moved anyway, drawn by something older than rules. Up close, the pod revealed deeper horror. Her wrists bore the bruises of repeated escape attempts, her ankles cut where she'd struggled too long against living shackles. No medical unit had tended her. No blood-neutral agents, just pain and time. Her chest rose and fell in slow, shallow breaths. Darius didn't remember issuing the command to his gauntlet, but the override crackled against the living structure. The bioglass recoiled, neural cords spasming in disapproval. The system recognized intrusion, resisted, then buckled beneath human brute force algorithms. The restraint snapped loose. She collapsed like a marionette with its strings cut but not to the ground. His arms caught her almost without thought. Her body was unnaturally warm, burning with low-grade fever. Up close, the smell of her was alien but not unpleasant ozone, crushed petals, and something like copper in the rain. He knelt with her in the shadow of her ruined prison, head bowed, breath shallow. For a long moment, neither moved. Then her eyelids fluttered. Not panic, not gratitude. Just quiet confusion tempered by exhaustion. No words passed between them, only breath. Wind shifted outside, dragging the storm back over the horizon. Helion 9's upper atmosphere flickered with pale auroras, magnetic surges that whispered along his suit's sensors. The storm would hit in minutes. He adjusted his grip and stood. Her limbs hung limp, but her fingers twitched once against his shoulder. Not resistance, not fear. Something else. He carried her toward shelter. The ruined gunship was half buried in impact. Debris hull split but not breached. Darius forced the hatch, sealed it behind him with a makeshift weld, and laid her gently atop a pile of thermal tarp. Cracked consoles blinked in weak protest. Emergency lights bathed them in amber and ghost blue. Medical protocol. Stabilizer first. His fingers found the base of her neck. Bare skin, too hot, too thin. The injector hissed nanofluid flooding her system. Muscles tightened then slackened, her breathing smoothed. Still no words, but her eyes opened half-lidded watching. He fed her. Not much nutrient-paced, foul and flavorless, but it kept people alive. She took it in silence, hands trembling slightly. Her eyes never left him. Not curiosity, not even suspicion. Just waiting, measuring. Time passed. The storm howled outside, pressing against the hull like the breath of some vast, unseen beast. Inside, they listened to the silence between the shrieks. Every creak in the ship's frame, every shift in the wind became a shared sound. She didn't speak, neither did he. But when he laid down beside the wall rifle across his lap, he saw her curl in slightly on the tarp. no longer rigid with pain or pride. Her eyes closed. Sleep took her. It was not the sleep of peace, but it was the closest she had known in weeks. And he, though trained never to rest with company he didn't trust, found his head nodding, breath slowing. Outside the storm passed. Inside something else remained. Not alliance, not truce. Only the faint, unmistakable spark of recognition between two beings who had no reason to see each other as anything but the enemy. But did. Morning on Helion 9 didn't break so much as bleed. The sun filtered through poisoned skies and long toxic streaks, gold tainted with crimson, caught between clouds that hadn't rained in years. The light that spilled into the shattered gunship was thin, jagged, and unkind. The alien stirred first. No sudden jolt. No flinch. She simply opened her eyes as if waking were not a change of state, but the continuation of a long vigil. Her body had stopped trembling. Fever had dulled. Her muscles still ached with emptiness, but something in the stillness of the ship made her pause. He hadn't killed her. He hadn't left. The human was awake too, back propped against a wall of scorched alloy face, half shadowed beneath the rim of his helmet, removed but resting nearby. His rifle lay across his knees, dormant yet poised. He hadn't slept deeply, but deeply enough to be vulnerable. A soldier's trust given without conditions. A strange thing. She sat up slowly. Her muscles screamed, but she did not fall. Her stomach clenched at the thought of food, but the paste tasted marginally less revolting now. There was no ceremony in the way she consumed it, no gratitude offered. But she finished all of it. Outside winds had calmed. Static readings in the air had faded. The atmosphere was survivable again for a time. The soldier finally moved, just a shift in posture. But he didn't look at her right away. He finished calibrating something on a wrist-mounted display, checking maps, vitals, threat zones. Efficient, focused, but not cold. She tested her voice. It rasped like a blade drawn across stone. Speaking hurt, so she didn't. He stood, slung the rifle to his back, and moved to a panel she hadn't noticed, a scavenged power core now rigged to an active bioscanner. Her vitals appeared in faint blue, orbiting a holographic silhouette of her body. Vital signs rising. Infection stable. Hydration low. No mention of loyalty. No indication of intent. He turned toward her. Still no words. He offered a strip of cloth, stained but dry. A gesture. She took it, wiping the blood from her lips, then tossed it back without comment. Movement became the next conversation. She rose. Not with ease, but with resolve. Each step away from the makeshift bedding was one toward control. He didn't assist. Didn't reach out. That mattered more than if he had. Her legs held. Barely. She turned toward the hatch. His hand rose just one motion, flat-palmed. Not stopping. Just waiting. He scanned the outside again. Readings suggested movement at the far ridge. Not pursuit. Scavenger drones, maybe. Autonomous war trash with enough sentience to kill, but not enough to explain why. Either side could have left them. He pulled open the hatch. The storm had left behind a scorched trail of electromagnetic debris, but the sky, tarnished and bleeding, was navigable. They walked in silence. The landscape was a scar without end. Burnt skeletons of flora, glassed soil, craters within craters. Every few meters, some remnant of war blinked or clicked machine bones, remembering their purpose long after it had passed. She kept pace, barely limping, pride over pain. Her eyes scanned the terrain with soldier's instinct, noticing the same faults he did, the same cover, the same dead drops. It struck him then how easily she moved like one of them. No adornments now, no visible rank. Just lean muscle, sharp eyes, and calculated steps. Still not human, but not the monster his side had made her out to be. Hours passed, no words exchanged, but signals layered between gestures. When she stumbled once, just once, he didn't catch her. He offered his arm. She ignored it. Then a moment later, she took it anyway. Not with softness, not with thanks, but with necessity. His arm was solid, warm. Human warmth, not chemical heat, not engineered exoplasma, but skin and sinew radiating life. She let go quickly. Their path cut through a collapsed supply depot, half swallowed by time and decay. Inside, they scavenged what they could. Rations, bandages, a cracked canister of oxygen-rich foam. All the while, neither spoke. not because they lacked language, but because nothing needed to be said. Their mission, now unspoken but shared, had become simple survive. Near sunset, they crossed into what had once been a neutral zone, a cluster of domed outposts abandoned after the ceasefire. Sensor towers slouched like drunk titans. Biological shields flickered with failing power, making visible the veins of alien tech woven through their walls. He motioned toward a sealed structure, old but intact. They breached it together. Not with force, but with sequence. His interface codes, her pulse signature. Human systems responded to commands. Vorthari systems responded to intention. Together, they overrode both. The air inside was stale but breathable. They made camp again. This time the proximity was closer, not touching, but seated on the same cargo crate, backs brushing lightly as they checked weapons, calibrated power cells, recharged scanners. She reached for a bandage and wrapped her arm without asking. His eyes followed the motion. Scars told a story, some recent, some old. None self-inflicted. She noticed his gaze, but didn't flinch. Instead, she dipped her fingers into a broken ration pack, pulled out a small fruit pod, muted violet still pulsing faintly. She sniffed it, then held it out. He hesitated, then accepted, bit into it. It was awful. He made a face. She smirked just barely. The gesture wasn't peace, but it was something. Later, as the dome's faint lights hummed overhead and the recycled air whispered through damaged filters, she lay curled not far from him. Her body usually coiled like a spring had loosened, not limp, but open. And in that quiet space, he finally allowed himself a thought he hadn't dared before. This wasn't rescue anymore. It was alliance. Deep beneath the derelict dome, beyond access corridors half collapsed under decades of erosion and seismic shifts, the air grew warmer. It pulsed faintly, as though the structure itself breathed with a memory it could no longer comprehend. They found the chamber behind a sealed iris door, half organic, half mechanical. He'd tracked the signal by instinct more than tech. The radiation was low but non-random. A rhythm. A signature too orderly to be environmental decay. He expected old reactors, maybe a dormant defense node. He did not expect this. The room opened like a wound in the earth. Vorthari design, unmistakably though older than her time. Columns of amber light rose from polished bone metal spirals. The floor undulated slightly with a biomechanical hum, and at the center, set into a raised plinth like a throne left unfinished, sat a structure resembling both a sarcophagus and a sanctuary. A healing chamber, ancient, sacred, alive. She moved first. Her steps slowed as they entered, the weight of recognition pressing on her shoulders. Not fear, not reverence. Something more ancestral. Her fingers brushed the edge of the chamber, and it responded with a ripple of bioluminescence. This was not meant for enemies. This was not meant for humans, but it welcomed her. He approached slowly. The interface at the base flickered a script unknown to his systems, but not to hers. Her fingers danced across the glyphs. Light pulsed. The pod unsealed with a wet sigh. It had room for one. She turned to him, her gaze unreadable. But the chamber chimed. A second pulse. Another slot opened. A second form. Two needed, two bound. Not healing, not revival. Synchronization. A phrase lit the air, translated by his implant, but not fully understood. Bioconvergence required. Sympathetic resonance pending. Consent required. His mouth dried. She read it too. Her skin prickled with awareness. The chamber would not heal her alone. The damage to her system's nervous, genetic, cellular was too severe. The process demanded a stabilizer, a second genome, a living circuit, and it had already selected one. His. The air thickened. The chamber pulsed again, hungry and patient. He didn't speak, neither did she, but he stepped forward. Boots echoed softly on the chamber floor. Armor clicked free, piece by piece. He shed the shell of war, of protocol, of distance. Beneath the plating, sweat gleamed on skin made for gravity, for friction, for touch. She did not look away. Her own armor unfastened in silence, retracting like living stone. Beneath her body bore the marks of captivity and endurance. Not fragile, never that, but wounded in ways that words couldn't dress. The lights kissed the bruises. Her shoulders were squared, yet her hands trembled faintly as they hovered near the chamber rim. Not from weakness. From choice. The human extended his hand, not in command, not in invitation. Inequality. She took it. They stepped into the twin hollows. The pod closed. Warmth enveloped them, not mechanical, not clinical, but biological. The walls pulsed with breath-like compression. Soft gels expanded beneath their backs, molding to spines to limbs to skin. Tendrils of living data brushed against their temples, wrists, the base of the spine. A second heartbeat layered over their own. Synchronizing. The voice was neither male nor female, not human, not Vorthari. It simply was. Biological markers aligned. Neural oscillations merged. One mind surged forward, then pulled back, skimming the surface of another. He felt her pain, raw and ancient. Flashes of exile, of screams in corridors, of shame unearned. Her father's voice cold and final, her own fists bloody from trying to escape. A life of perfection demanded and never defined. She felt his resolve, heavy and simple, the weight of comrades left behind, the smell of burning steel, the sensation of an aching jaw from grinding teeth after orders that killed the wrong people. Knights staring at ceiling panels, wondering if humanity still meant anything. Their pulses matched, their senses bent inward. Breath became shared. The chamber reached its apex. At the molecular level, signatures bled into one another temporarily, impermanently, and yet meaningfully. His genome, chaotic and adaptive, wrapped around hers like ivy and flame. Her biology, ancient and ordered, accepted the interference. Resonance confirmed. Neural bridge stable. Fusion window 74 hours. Side effects probable. He gasped. Her eyes snapped open. Something had shifted. The chamber opened. The first thing he noticed was her hand in his. Their skin glowed faintly, hers emerald with veins of silver, his tanned and scarred, but now both shimmered with a shared undertone of blue, a temporary echo. He saw himself in her memories. She felt his heart thudding through her chest. They sat up as one. Not lovers, not yet, but something had been offered and accepted. She touched her temple. The pain was gone. The fever had broken. Her limbs were steadier than they had been in days, but more than that, she could feel his thoughts like echoes. Not words, not intrusions. Feelings, instincts, a brush of concern, a flicker of amusement at her raised eyebrow, a flash of embarrassment when he realized she could sense it. She stood first. He followed. The chamber darkened behind them, its purpose fulfilled. Whatever they were before, they were no longer separate, and whatever came next would require them to be more. The first test came not in fire, but in silence. When they emerged from the chamber, the world felt unfamiliar, not in its physical shape, but in the way it responded to their presence. The dome lights brightened as they passed, flickering with a rhythm matched to their breaths. The air seemed to thin when their pulses rose in unison. Machines they hadn't noticed before, dormant consoles, semi-organic panels, Vorthari sensor roots stirred as they approached, blinking to life with bioelectric awareness. Their fusion wasn't just internal. The world noticed. They moved through the corridors in step unspoken rhythms, guiding their strides. Darius's eyes scanned corners before she reached them. Jara's fingers danced across alien interfaces a second before he realized they were there. If he thought of cover, she was already moving toward it. When she hesitated, unsure of a direction, his instincts filled the gap. Linked minds didn't mean shared thoughts, but they no longer needed words. At the dome's outer edge, the first threat emerged. A scavenger drone, K-8 variant, human-made, long abandoned. Its eyes flared red at the sight of motion, and its limbs unfolded into bladed arms humming with kinetic buzz. The warning shot should have come next. It didn't get the chance. Her movement blurred forward faster than before. The pod had done more than heal. It had enhanced. She swept beneath its charge, her palm glowing with bioluminescent static. One strike to the undercarriage, and the machine collapsed with a screech of sparks. He fired at the second drone before it reached her, didn't need to think. He'd already felt the shift in her posture, the slight recoil in her lungs that warned of a second attacker. The plasma bolt burned through the drone's optic array, and it dropped in a twitching heap. 2 enemies, 2 targets, 2 minds, 1 response. After the battle, they looked at each other, not with awe, but confirmation. This worked! In the distance, a low tremor groaned through the cracked ground. Dust rose. Darius tapped into a nearby relay node. New signal spikes flooded his HUD. Dozens of heat signatures, moving fast. Not scavengers, not drones, not friendly. He opened the tactical display. The old warfront had left trenches of data infrastructure buried under the crust, some of it still linked to surviving satellites. The overlay lit up in a fan of red. Enemy units converging on the dome. Not human. Not Vorthari. Something else. He glanced at her. She nodded once. No hesitation. They ran. Their path threaded through labyrinthine corridors toward the weapons cache. Along the way, more systems awakened doors unsealed before they touched them. Wall-mounted energy conduits extended tiny filaments toward their passing shadows. One screen blinked a message in ancient Vorthari script that needed no translation. Air pattern confirmed. Guardian protocol engaged. Jara's jaw clenched, but she didn't slow. He could feel her pulse shift more memory than thought. She had been cast out, branded dangerous, a traitor to her kind. Now the machines called her heir. They reached the weapons cache, long sealed, almost mythic. The vault's threshold scanned them both, then opened with a hiss like a sigh of recognition. Inside, relics. Weapons grown not forged, bone and plasma, crystal and blood metal. Human tech would have blinked warning lights at every surface, but here, everything simply waited to be touched. He reached first. The grip of the rifle molded to his palm. It was alien in shape, but welcomed his balance, his heat. It hummed faintly as he raised it, its targeting node syncing with his retinal scan. She took the blade. It curled like a living tendon pulsing with light that matched her veins. As she held it aloft, it elongated, responding not to command, but to certainty. When she moved, it followed. When she stilled, it shimmered. The walls echoed with the low vibration of purpose. They didn't speak. They walked. Out into the open. The enemy had arrived. Quadrupedal exoform's glassy skin over shifting muscle-like fiber. Not Vorthari, not Terran. Pale eyes glowed within translucent skulls. Their weapons pulsed with wet chemical light. 30 of them, maybe more. Darius lifted the rifle. She stepped beside him. Their hearts aligned. He shot first 3 bursts clean and measured. The weapon didn't just fire, it sang. The pulse rounds bent mid-air, guided by microgravity tethers that read his intent. The first enemy fell before it could raise its gun. She dashed into motion, blade trailing arcs of shimmering plasma. When she moved, the world bent around her, the air thickening in her wake. Her strikes were too fast to follow, too deliberate to be wild. One after another, the enemy fell. They moved like tide and flame. She'd draw fire, he'd suppress. He'd stumble back from a hit. She'd close the gap. 2 exoforms flanked them, one from above, the other from behind. She didn't turn. But he felt her tension shift. He turned, knelt, and fired over her shoulder without looking. Both enemies crumpled. She inhaled low and sharp and dove into the final wave like a spirit of vengeance. When it ended, the field was silent. Bodies, if they could be called that, twitched in the dust. The ground was blackened in concentric scorch marks. The smell of ozone and burnt chitin filled the air. Neither of them spoke for a long time. She dropped to one knee, not from pain, from fatigue. Her energy had burned high. The chamber had gifted them something, but it was not limitless. He approached slowly, crouched beside her. Their shoulders touched. Heat passed between them. No words, just breath. The battle hadn't bonded them. The bond had allowed the battle. He glanced at the horizon. No more enemies, not yet. But something told him the real war hadn't even begun. And now, they'd face it as one. The ground still smoldered when the sky opened. Not with weather, with light. Above the blackened ridges, a new shape descended, silent, massive, and unlike anything either of them had seen. It was neither Terran nor Vorthari. Its surface shimmered like frozen oil. No exhaust, no heat signature. But it bent the clouds in its wake, distorting space with quiet arrogance. Not a ship, a presence. The hybrid pair stood atop the blasted field, their bodies marked with ash and phosphorescent glow from weapons that still hummed softly. Darius's hand tightened on the alien rifle. Jara's blade curled around her arm like a snake reluctant to sleep. She stepped closer to him, not in fear, but in certainty. The link between them shivered. A pulse, a message, not language, not thought. A feeling. Pressure behind the eyes, 1,000 eyes, watching. Darius flinched. Jara winced. The sky being was communicating, or trying to, but the frequency was wrong. Jagged, violating, reaching into memory and flesh alike. The pain sharpened. Then unexpectedly another pulse emerged. From her. No, from them. The bond. It reacted. Not defensively, but resonantly. A ripple of shared sensation surged up their spines, through their chests, and out of their joined presence like a sonar. The force above paused, or seemed to. Its light dimmed. The pressure eased. And then came the vision. Not external. Internal. A shared hallucination beamed directly into their hybridized minds. They stood in a room of endless white, faceless beings, circling them, each one a fractured mirror of species long extinct. Every creature spoke without mouths, gestured without limbs. The chamber filled with sensations, guilt, awe, reverence, warning. The child, a phrase echoed not in sound but certainty. The child will be the key. In the vision, Jara's hand moved to her abdomen. Heat flared beneath her palm. Darius turned toward her, recognition dawning just as the pulse grew brighter. Then the vision shattered. They gasped awake on the battlefield again, knees buckling, skin drenched in cold sweat despite the heat. Jara's fingers shook, not from fear. She already knew. So did he. Something ancient in the healing chamber, something designed not just to repair but to evolve, had triggered more than a bond. A conception. Their child existed already, not potential, not theory. Now, she staggered back, steadying herself on a twisted girder. Her eyes glowed faintly. No longer just emerald, now laced with strands of silver and blue. He moved to her side, hands hovering, not quite daring to touch. But she took one and placed it firmly against her abdomen. No words, just understanding. The child was a hybrid in the truest sense. Not a mix of genes, but of legacies. The link between them had become more than neural. It had created life woven from both worlds and something else entirely. And it was the reason the sky being had come. A ship far above now emitted a low harmonic. Different now, lower, softer, an offering. The ground pulsed beneath them. Machines half buried in dust woke. Old defense systems, and something else. Jara turned toward a nearby console, one she had ignored before. It blinked now rapidly. She approached it. Her hand hovered over the interface, hesitated, then touched. Light flared. A new voice entered their link, not a being this time, but an AI. Ancient. Vorthari in origin, but built to interface with foreign minds. Dormant for millennia. It recognized her. Or rather, them. It called the child the bridge. The convergence that would allow machine and organics to unify. That would unlock systems sealed since the fall. The AI had waited for a pattern match. It had found none until now. Darius stood motionless, processing. Jara translated in real time, her voice low, rhythmic, haunted. The child would not be merely born. It would awaken. Its existence would trigger command codes buried in Terran and Vorthari installations, alike fail-safes from when both sides had been created by a common progenitor long forgotten. The war had been orchestrated, prolonged, sustained. This was the endpoint, not destruction, resolution. The enemy forces, those strange, faceless exoforms they had fought, were not rogue factions. They were protectors of a secret, meant to keep convergence from happening. And now that convergence had begun, they would escalate. Jara's hand moved to the console again. Her breath hitched. The AI asked if she wished to activate the command node. Doing so would awaken every hidden system in the surrounding quadrant. Old weapons, old guardians, old archives. Darius stepped beside her. She looked up at him. There was no question in her eyes, only choice. Together they placed their hands on the panel. The pulse raced outward like a supernova in slow motion. Satellites turned. Ancient hulls blinked back to life. Across the cratered wastelands, long-buried machines stirred. Above them, the great ship pulsed again. But this time, it did not descend. It turned. It vanished. A signal received, a future acknowledged. In the silence that followed, their minds returned to one another. The bond now deeper, wider, open. Jara stepped forward. Darius caught her. Their foreheads touched. His hand still rested lightly on her stomach. A heartbeat, faint but growing, echoed in both of their chests. This child would not be raised on a battlefield. It would be born of war, but into peace, if they could protect it. If the world would let them. They didn't return to the forward base. There was nothing left to report. No command that could process what they had become, nor any directive that could encompass the existence of a hybrid child encoded with ancient protocols. Darius and Jara left the battlefield behind, moving east through the dead ravines of Helion 9. The world they had known, the factions, the alliances, the definitions of enemy and ally, no longer held. They were fugitives now, symbols of a future no side had planned for. The AI remained silent as they traveled. Its purpose had been fulfilled activation. After that, it merely observed, sometimes surfacing in their link, like a forgotten song offering fragments of languages or ghost images of machinery, reshaping itself underground. Jara's pregnancy advanced rapidly, not in days, but not months either. The gestation wasn't human, wasn't Vorthari. Her body changed not monstrously, but symphonically. Darius watched as her senses sharpened. Her skin took on radiant undertones. Her presence in the link became more focused. The child spoke in sensations, flickers of joy, bursts of fear, questions without words. At night, when they rested beneath the canopy of scorched trees, she would lie against him, his hand over her stomach, and the three of them would simply breathe together. One rhythm, one pulse. The silence between them had never felt so full. The dome where it all began was long behind them. In its place, they discovered a hidden enclave, ruins overgrown with soft moss and bioluminescent flowers that pulsed like the glow of unborn stars. Here, technology and nature blurred. They made it their shelter. And for the first time since the war, peace became not a theory, but a sensation. The slow-growing moss beneath bare feet, the hum of ancient circuits now purring softly, the brush of fingers against skin not armored but alive. Time passed, and then one morning, Jara stood on the cliff edge above their enclave arms, folded over the child growing within, and saw it a small transport descending, its silhouette familiar. Not Terran military, not Vorthari command, but civilian. Word had spread, not by radio, not by proclamation, but through the machines, those old slumbering watchers now reawakened. They'd shared images, signals, echoes of the bond, stories of the battle, stories of her, of him, of them. And now the world was beginning to listen. The transport carried emissaries, not soldiers. A Terran xenolinguist, a Vorthari elder whose robes shimmered with diplomatic rank. No guards, no threats, only caution and awe. Darius met them at the perimeter. Jara stood beside him. The emissaries spoke in rehearsed tones, unsure how to address the impossible. The hybrid child, the convergence, had become legend already. Some called it the firstborn. Others, the last solution. Every faction wanted it, feared it. But no one controlled it. The child chose who it spoke to, and it had spoken only to them. In the weeks that followed, a new world began to bloom. Not suddenly, not without struggle, but undeniably. Enclaves like theirs began to emerge, places where Terran tech and Vorthari biosystems merged. Places where humans and aliens dared to live together. Places where children born of both carried gifts neither side had imagined. The old powers faltered, not from war, from irrelevance, and Jara, once exiled, once bound in chains and left to die, stood on the council steps of the Helion conquered, wearing robes of starlight, and whispered with a voice that carried new gravity. Darius, ever the soldier, stood nearby, not as her shadow, not as her protector, but as her equal. The child named Sira, in both languages, sat between them. Hair like midnight, laced with silver eyes shifting between blue and green skin that shimmered in certain light. And when Sira placed her hand on the old AI core brought before the council, the machines bowed. Not in submission, in recognition. Because the future wasn't about dominance or legacy. It was about choice. And Sira had been born not from order but defiance. From a human who broke protocol to save a prisoner. From an alien who misbehaved to test a world that had caged her. From love forged in fire, silence, and shared breath. Not a weapon, a bridge. And bridges are meant to be crossed. Word count 117. Closing section 200 words. And so ends the story of Alien Girl Misbehaved. So the human delivered some firm discipline. A tale of war, defiance, connection, and transformation. What began as an unlikely encounter between two survivors became the seed of a new world. Not through domination, not through conquest, but through something far rarer on any battlefield: empathy. Darius Cole and Kale Jara challenged the limits of loyalty and identity. In choosing each other, they reshaped not only their own fates, but the fate of every species watching from the ruins. And the child Sira the Bridge became more than a symbol. She became a promise. That the past doesn't define the future. That discipline is not suppression, but understanding. And that misbehavior, when born from truth, might be the first act of freedom. If this story resonated with you, if you felt the tension, the intimacy, the spark, consider subscribing to our channel for more cinematic sci-fi narratives like this. Leave a comment with your favorite moment or the character that spoke to you most. And as always, thank you for joining us on this journey beyond the stars.